Welcome to Discovering. We're taking a look at a freshwater mussel survey being conducted on the Menominee River.
We have people that are scuba diving, snorkeling, and then we have others that are supporting those folks as they search for mussels.
And a look at how to use a flasher. Stick around, that's all tonight right here on Discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone. Forest thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak. Surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields. Call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill. The eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
Canoe or kayak down just about any UP river or stream and you're sure to pass over a variety of freshwater mussels, or clams as we commonly call them. I met up with a group of researchers on the Menominee River during a recent freshwater mussel survey.
Well, what we've been doing here is following up on a mussel study that was done in 2012. At that time, the work was done by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. And they had been looking at the mussels in the Menominee River at various points over the years. Since 2012, We Energies has done some work on the Twin Falls Dam. So the various agencies that are responsible for the river thought it was appropriate for We Energies to follow up on the study that was conducted in 2012 and see if there have been changes in the mussel community in that time period. Potentially anything that could be attributed to the change in the flow of the dam because of the new structure here. That's when Whitewater Associates was contacted by We Energies. We developed a plan to repeat that 2012 study with assistance from the DNRs of both states and others. There are two components of it. One is a quantitative study. We are putting out transects perpendicular to the river at set locations. We're using the same locations were used in 2012. And along that transect then, we are putting quadrats out. Quadrat that's about 0.25 meter by 0.25 meter. And at each of those we assess the habitat and we collect any live mussels that we find or see in that quadrat. In all, we will probably have nearly 1,000 quadrats when we're finished here. We will be able to tabulate the mussels that are present. The analysis of the data will take some weeks into the future. But what we do know right now is that we are finding all of the mussel species that were found in 2012. We are finding also young mussels, which is really good news because it means that the mussels of those species are reproducing here and continuing to recruit young ones into their populations. That's great news. The qualitative part of the study went to other areas in the river, but in that case they're meandering around the river bottom looking for all living mussels that they can find. A couple purposes for that. One is just to see, are there any additional species that we don't find in our quantitative quadrats that they're doing downstream of me here.
So this is a qualitative study. They're just trying to see the number of species that are here. So they just went out and collected and did what they call a timed search. They just go for a certain amount of time and look around. And we're also noting if the mussels are less than 4 years. The reason we do that is because to find a year-old mussel in a big river like this is really difficult because they're very tiny. And so we look at the age to see whether there's recruitment going on. Recruitment meaning that they've successfully reproduced and they're parasitic on fish. Actually, mussels have a parasitic larval stage on fish. After the larva, which is called a glaucidia, metamorphoses, it drops off the fish, and then it's at the juvenile stage. Some of these are really long-lived mussels. This one's probably like 15 years old. There is one here that is 2 years old. You can tell their mussels are like trees. You can look at the rings and look at the growth. A lot of the shells actually get very worn down. You really don't see this that much in the lower peninsula. So we're recording the wear on these too when we were looking at the quadrant samples. So you can see that one has a little bit of wear, this one does. Some of them didn't at all. There's a lot of diversity of mussels in North America in the family that we call Unionidae. This is the type of mussels that are the native ones that have this parasitic life stage. And down south, like in Alabama, they might have, I think they have about 100 to 120 species in that state. We have like 43, 44, depending on which taxonomist you talk to, in Michigan. And that's more diversity than some parts of continents across the world. So we have this really rich mussel fauna in North America. You can see what the different species. One of the things that's kind of unique, these are called floaters. They're thinner shelled usually than the other mussels, and they don't have any of these teeth that keep the shells from wiggling back and forth. So you can tell it's a floater because you can just gently wiggle it back and forth, because these teeth are absent. This is how you can identify these. They call them pseudocardinal and lateral teeth. And that's how you can distinguish some of the species if you're just looking at shells. So there's pseudocardinal teeth, and then there's lateral teeth, and then there's like no teeth. This is one particular species. It's in a more derived group of mussels. This one is they're what we call lampsalines, and this one on the right is it's a female, and you can tell it's a female. The females actually brood the larva in their gills, and so the shell grows around the enlarged gills, so it has a little bit more of an expanded edge there. And then this is a male, and it doesn't brood the gills, so it doesn't have the expanded edge. But these are really an interesting group, because there's ones that are in this group that have an expansion of the mantle flap that looks just like a minnow. So it's really cool to see it. You go down, when you're swimming or looking down, you might see something that looks like a minnow, and it's not really moving, but it looks like a minnow just sitting there, and it's to attract the fish to come in so it can infect the fish. So mussels are really important because in aquatic systems they provide habitat actually to aquatic insects. This is, you can see there's caddisfly cases attached to this, and they've done studies that show that it increases habitat availability for the caddisflies and the aquatic insects. Sadly, they just found 2 zebra mussels. These are old ones and they look a bit worn. The zebra mussels have been the bane of native mussels. They like to attach onto the native mussels, and it's like having a couple of monkeys on your back stealing your food. But the zebra mussels actually don't do well in fast flowing water, so they haven't attached to any of these mussels, which is a good sign.
These zebra mussels are a non-native mussel species. All the other mussels that we're looking at belong here. They've been here for millennia. The zebra mussels are both competitors of those native mussels, and they are also a nuisance to the individual mussels because they use the hard shells of the native mussels as a substrate. And sometimes so many zebra mussels can attach to a native mussel that it can't sit upright in the substrate anymore, and it essentially dies of malnutrition or suffocates because it can't get enough oxygen because the zebra mussels are just clogging everything up. All of those zebra mussel populations were transferred to those water bodies upstream, very likely by people, boat and traders and so on. It's why we are so adamant about cleaning our watercraft whenever we go from one body of water to another. Not just for zebra mussels, but the rest of the aquatic invasives that are out there, like spiny water fleas and some of the aquatic plants also that are deleterious to the environment, these aquatic ecosystems. Every mussel that we collect from these quadrats, we replace in the same quadrat, in the correct orientation. And behind me, they're discussing that orientation because we are about to release about 100 mussels that they just collected from one of our qualitative sites. So they place them back in the same position that they always find them, and so that the mussel can dig back into the substrate and go on with its happy life. Some of these mussels that we found are 18 years old. Not everyone appreciates how old an animal, what we as kids used to just simply call clams in these rivers, but they are a long-lived animal.
What I'm going to do with these shells is bring them back and deposit them into the University of Michigan's Museum of Zoology. They have one of the most important collections for freshwater mussels in the United States, and I'm depositing these shells as voucher specimens. There hasn't been a whole lot of information on this part of the river, so we can deposit these specimens in, and if somebody wants to come 20 years from now, and if there's changes or something, there's a record of what we found there at this point, and a record of the shells and what they look like. Sometimes this is needed because of misidentifications by people, or if some things are being, the species are being re-evaluated, things like that. Anyway, and the other thing is, if you look at the collection records on the museum, which is offered to the public, you can do a search in their collection and find out what types of species are in that river. So we have a really great historical collection in Michigan. We're really fortunate with that. Some of the gunk that's on there, well, we'll try to clean them up a little, but sometimes that's useful if somebody was doing a study of some certain chemistry of things that were going on in the river. They could actually use the shells to look at some of that information, because the things that have been deposited in the shells at certain times, they've actually used mussel shells to look at heavy metal pollution, because you can see the times that the heavy metals have been deposited in the shells.
We have 9 people working in the river today. And it's an amazing, really, collection of scientists and field technicians that have worked on projects like this before. This is a pretty large-scale one, and in an environment that takes some real special skills. The Menominee River is truly an awesome body of water. We have 2 people that are scuba diving. We have 2 people that are snorkeling, and then we have others that are kind of supporting those folks as they search for mussels. 2 scientists are using a canoe as their work platform. As we collect mussels, we bring them to those 2 scientists who are identifying them, measuring them, weighing them, determining the gender of each mussel when they can, and aging them. So that's every mussel that we find is worked up in that way. And I'm super proud of this team of people I'm working with, because we've been doing this now for 3 days, and everybody knows their job. The river is beautiful, the flow and the habitat are all wonderful here.
Somewhat colder water, here's Cody Cass with some insight into how a flasher works.
Cody Cass here. Today I'm going to show you how to use a flasher. A lot of people call them Vexilars. This one so happens to be a Markham. And a couple other companies too, like Humminbird and Garmin, make them as well. But what they are is they're ice fishing sonars. So they're just like you're on the boat sonar, they're going to kick sound waves down, return them back up, and if there's fish or soft bottom, hard bottom, it's going to be able to tell you all that. And it's also going to tell you if there's fish suspended in the water column and where your lure is at as well. So to get started, you have a battery in the back. You have the head unit, of course, right here. That's kind of the brain box of the operation. And a lot of times they come with these carrying cases like this, so I can just pick it up. You can hop from hole to hole and be pretty mobile doing it. And they're pretty lightweight. I have a lithium battery in there, so it's a little bit lighter, and also it lasts longer on the water. So jumping into it, head unit, like I said, you have your transducer arm that'll swing out. Then you have your transducer, so pull that out. What's really nice about these transducers is that they're self-leveling. It's not like your open water sonar where you have to sit there and mess with the water line, make sure everything is lined up. So if that just hangs there, it's completely parallel at the bottom. It's going to give you an accurate readout every single time. Your first time using it, you're going to want to, you have a stopper on here. You're going to want to adjust that stopper so it hits just underneath the ice. So I like to put the transducer down, and I just keep going, and then I lift up with my cord on the side. I just keep pulling, and then I drop it down a couple inches. So this is pretty much good how I had it set. All right, so to turn it on, you have this range you have this range knob here. It's going to have off, 20, 40, 80, and 160. So turning it on to 20 mode, you're gonna fill in a lot of different colors here, and I'll explain that here in a second. So starting at the 12 o'clock position, that's wherever your transducer is at. And then your 6 o'clock position is 10 feet. If you see 9, it's 15, and then coming all the way back up near like the 11 o'clock position, you see there's 19. Say if it was 30 feet, it would just look like blank, and you'd have to turn it over to 40. So the bottom, see, it's about at 4.5, so I'd have to double that. So that'd be at 9. I'll switch back to 20 because we're shallower. A fish, if you see at the 8-foot mark, that's clearly a fish there. There's some gap, the separation off the bottom, and there's a fish that's kind of moving in and out. Anything that moves is typically going to be fish as well. So how I like to read the bottom is reading it counterclockwise until the very edge. You see it's about 9 feet where that red stops, and that's most likely going to be bottom. Looks like there might be some fish on the bottom. What those colors mean is red is the most hard return, or the strongest return, I should say. So that means you're gonna be hitting rock, you're gonna be hitting really hard like sand bottom, or you're gonna be seeing fish as well, and that's gonna be directly underneath the cone. On this Markham unit, the next color is going to be green. Green is your in-between, it's kind of your middle return. So a lot of times it's what fish are going to look like if they're just outside the cone. And also sometimes you get weeds that way, but a lot of times your weeds are gonna show up kind of a mix of green and yellow. And what yellow is, that's your weakest return. So if you look at it, your transducer as a cone going out, right now it's 20 degrees. So if you get something that's right on the edge of your cone, a lot of times that's what fish are gonna look like. They're gonna be yellow, especially if it's coming in and out, because we know that weeds don't move. And then as it comes closer, it'll be yellow, green, and then closer to the hole, it might be red. It hits your lure, then you know you got a fish. So your zoom feature, you press the zoom button, it's gonna cut your screen in half. So you press that, everything on the right side that's your entire water column condensed, and everything on the left side is going to be where your zoom is. If you see there's 2 flashing yellow lines, it's 2.5 feet. So anything within those flashing lines is gonna display on the left side. So I'll keep pressing down. It starts to fill in around the 6 o'clock position. You know that's where the bottom is. I like to give it a few clicks through there just so I know I know where the bottom is, and I can work this whole water column here. All right, so one function that's on here, it's called superfine line. What that's going to do is going to make all these lines that you see on here, it's going to make them a lot smaller. What that does is decreases your target separation. What target separation is the ability for your flasher to be able to distinguish the distance between 2 items. So I can just press that here. It makes everything a lot more fine, so it's gonna be harder for the camera to pick up, but I can see what's going on a lot better. All right, so putting everything into practice, I'm gonna drop my lure down. Ooh, there we go. That's a nicer hit. I take the transducer out, just so you don't get tangled up. That was a nicer hit. Ooh, that's a nice bluegill. That's decent. You know, that one came up, that crushed it. That was a good hit. I do like using soft plastic as well. Most times, especially early ice like this, it's going to be pretty aggressive fish that you're on. In this lure right here, it's the Eurotackle Plankton. It's a pretty flat profile, but it's not a huge profile, so you can still fish it pretty finesse, and also being that flat profile, it's going to show up on your flasher a little bit better. There we go. Oh, that's a bigger crappie. Pull and drag on the way down. That elevator. Another thing worth mentioning too is you don't have to go out and buy a dedicated ice fishing flasher. I like a flasher like this. It's just easier to read than a digital one. But if you already have like a medium to small size sonar for your boat, a lot of times you can get an ice fishing transducer and you can just plug that in and you can fish just like that, and it's just as effective, and you'll have mapping as well, so you can see the contours of the lake, or if you have waypoints already saved on your head unit in the summertime, you can easily just bring them with you out on the ice that way. All right, so as you see, a flasher is an invaluable tool for ice fishing. I used to fish without one for years, and then I finally got one, and it's made me a lot more efficient. So I'm gonna get back to fishing. It's been a pretty good day so far. Now that I found some a little bit bigger fish, I'm gonna see if I can get a few for the table.
Coming up this weekend, it's the Bray Memorial Predator Hunt, which runs from January 13th through the 30th. Registration takes place at the William Anderson Sport and Rec Club in Hermansville from 4 to 6:30 Central Time on January 13th. The event ends on January 30th with registration from 10 till noon at the clubhouse in Hermansville. $25 a person or $50 for a two-person team. 2 divisions and some great prizes. That's it for this week. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week right here on Discovering.